All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to today's video. Have you been struggling to get consistent prints out of your PEI texture plate on your X1C or your P1P? Because I sure have, and I actually don't use my PEI plate anymore, and I really would like to because I like the fact that everything comes off of it really easy. You don't have to mess around with the glue. It leaves a cool little surface on everything. So I really would like to use it. I just don't get the consistent prints out of it. And as stated in my update video, I think it's because of the LiDAR and the flow calibration and the uneven surface of the textured plate giving it issues doing that. Since I've had the printer for 6 months now, I've also started to question why we have to do flow calibration every single time anyway, and is it really doing what we want it to do? And let me kind of explain that a little bit. If I use two different brands of filament in a print, it only calibrates the first color that's going to print. It doesn't calibrate the second color that I'm going to print. So how are the flow calibrations for one manufacturer moved over to another one? Because I can tell you after doing a couple of these calibrations, they're very close, but they're not the same. So what is that flow calibration? What is the purpose of that doing? And can't we just calibrate a filament once and kind of use that same calibration for here on out? Why doesn't it save all of that stuff? So those are some of the questions that I've had as I'm coming up on having the printer for 6 months. And I think some of the questions that we can answer today is no, I don't think we need the flow calibration every time. And especially if you're doing multicolor prints with different manufacturers. So today, what we're going to do is use Orca Slicer, and I'm going to show you some tips and tricks to make the calibration steps super easy. I'll show you a couple of tips and tricks, what's important, what to think about, and what is it that we're actually changing as we go through these different things. So today we'll dive into the Orca Slicer, and hopefully we'll be able to tune our filaments so that we can use the PEI plate and make sure that we're going to get a consistent print every time we print on it and not rely on unreliable LiDAR on the PEI plate. And even on the cool plate and the high temperature plate, once we've calibrated a filament, I really don't see the need to do that anymore. So if all of that sounds good, then sit back and relax. I'll get everything ready. All right, so let's get started with the control, and I printed out a Benchy with this eSun PLA Plus. And it did come out pretty good. You'll see all of the overhangs. There was no stringing or anything like that. Everything was really good, except it had one flaw. And on the underside of each one of these places where it flared out, you can see that there was a little bit of imperfection in there, we'll call it. So we'll see if after we get done tuning the filament, if we can take any of this out and smooth any of it out and get the consistent prints that we're after. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing that we'll do is go into Orca Slicer, and let's go ahead and start on the orange filament here. And the first thing that we'll need to do is open this up, and we'll need to save this as a new filament. So all we need to do for that is to hit the little save button right there. And then we'll call this filament test, and we'll go ahead and save that. All right, so the next thing that we'll do is we'll go ahead and start the calibration. And just like we did before, we'll do several of the calibrations, except we're not going to do the temperature calibration. We'll leave that at 220. We will do the flow rate, and we will do the pressure advance. The reason that I'm not doing the temperature is the temperature tower kept falling off of the PEI plate. So the first one that we'll do is pressure advance. In my last video, I did the PA line. In this video, we're going to do the tower. I've watched several other videos and read several things, and I think the tower is really the way to go. And the important thing to remember here is this PA step, or pressure advance step, 0.002. So what we're going to do is print this thing out, and we're going to look at all of the corners on this thing and look for where it's the most perfect. We're going to measure from the bottom up, And however many millimeters it is to where it's really, really good, we're going to measure by that step, that 0.002. So we'll go ahead and slice this. And then whenever we hit print plate, let's make sure that we don't have flow calibration checked on here. I'm not going to do a time lapse of this one, but let's make sure that we don't do flow calibration from here on out. All right, so as you can see here at the very bottom, it wasn't very good. We can zoom in there. And then at the very, very top, it wasn't good. And even here in the middle, you can see that it's stringing and there's some gaps and everything there. But where I think it looked the absolute best is just above 10, right here in this 10, 11, 12, 13 area. But that's what you're looking for on each of these. And I will say taking a picture of all of this stuff and then being able to zoom in definitely helps out. That's probably the biggest trick that I can give you throughout this whole process. All right, so now that we're in here, we'll need to go back into our filament and we'll need to go ahead and update our pressure advance. So if we're going to use 11, we need to multiply 11 millimeters times the step, which was 0.002. So that comes out to 0.022. All right, so on to the next test. So we've done this test before, but this time let's dig a little bit deeper into actually what it's doing. So this 0 right here is where our flow rate is at right now. And this test is going to increment the extrusion by 5% all the way up to 20 and decrease it all the way by 20. To be honest with you, I don't see any filaments really needing this bottom row or this top row, and I think most of everything will be right here in the middle. And again, the big trick with this one is once we've sliced it, once we print, again, no flow calibration. Once this prints out, take a picture of it and put it on something where you can zoom in and take a look at it. It'll make it a lot easier to see what we need to see with this. So let me get this printed out and I'll show you what we're looking for. All right, so here's what the print looks like. Here is where our flow is at right now. And like I was saying, these are the different ones. Whenever you print it out, you can really zoom in and take a look at these ridges right here. And you'll see that this is fairly flat. And what we're looking for is which one of these squares is the flattest. And as we can see from here, the one in the middle is the flattest. You can definitely see the ridges on the bottom right there. The top is blurred out. We'll take a look at that here in just a second. But from this angle right here, the 0 is the smoothest one. If you're caught between two of them, go with the higher number because the second test will let you bring it back down. And just to zoom in on the top ones there to show you, you can really see the ridges. There. All right, with that test done, we would update something here if we needed to, but since it was 0, we don't need to update it, but that doesn't mean that we're done. We need to go to the second one because that will fine tune it. The first flow rate test did everything by 5% at a time. The second flow rate test does everything by 1% at a time. So you can see it starts with 0 and it starts counting itself backwards. And that's why I said before, do the higher number if you're caught between two. So this one will let you come back down. Again, when you're done with this one, take a picture of it so you can zoom in. And we'll go ahead and slice it. And again, when you print the plate, do not select flow calibration. So I'll go ahead and print this and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so as you can see here, we'll take a look at the 0 and the ridges on it. And we're doing the same thing. We're going to zoom in and look at all of the ridges. And from this view, -1 between these three looks like it's the smoothest. This one has a couple of ridges. This one's the ridges are not as pronounced. Let's take a look at the other ones. And as you can see big ridges in all of the other ones. So -1 it is. So let me show you the math on what we need to do with the modifier is what these numbers are called. So in the tutorial under flow rate, you'll see this little formula right here. And right here where you see this +5, that's what is called the modifier. So that's the number that we'll need to update. And ours will be -1 meaning that this calculation will be 99 times 0.98 divided by 100. So with the calculation done, we can go ahead and update the filament again. And after doing the math, that came to 9702. So we'll enter that in and be sure to save and hit OK. And then the last test that we'll do actually doesn't have any documentation, but it is something that we've talked about on the channel before, and that's the max volumetric speed. So if everybody remembers, you've heard me talk about this max volumetric speed down here at the bottom. And you'll see that on the generic, it sets it at 12 millimeters cubed per second, and on the bamboo it's on 21, and even on some of them it's 22. So there is a test that we can do to see what the max volumetric speed is for our filament. So we'll go ahead and go into calibration and hit more and hit the max flow rate. And I usually do this from 10 to 30 with a step of 0.5. So once we slice the plate, if you hit flow right here, you'll see these different colors correspond to the different max flow rates that it'll be doing as it's going around this. So what we'll be looking for is the point at which it fails, and that'll tell us, right below the point at which it fails will tell us the max volume that we can run in the filament. So I'll go ahead and get this printed out, and again, I will not be using the flow calibration to do that. I'll print it out and let me show you what it looks like. So as you can see here towards the top of the print here, it did start to fail up into the 20s in the max flow rate there. And you can see that it started to warp even a lot below there. And you can see that it warped at the top of all of the twists and the turns there. So I'm going to go with the pretty conservative value, and that's what I've seen other people's go. I don't think I'm going to go up into the 20s with the bamboo filament, but I think 15 is a pretty conservative number to go with it. We'll do a high quality print and not a chance of warping or failing. So let's go ahead and get that entered. All right, so now that we're back in Orca, we'll go in here and you'll notice it changed it to 200. So we'll definitely need to change that thing. So we'll drop it back down to 15. Make sure you hit the save button on that one. And that's all of the tuning that I think that we'll need to make a significant difference on that Benchy that we did. It was pretty close, but we saw that there were some errors on the underside. So let's print out another Benchy and see what it looks like. All right, so the old one's on the right and the new tuned one is on the left. And man, you can see that we got almost all of that artifacting off of it. So as I zoom in here, you can see that all of that artifacting is almost gone. And it looks a lot better there. I think if we did a little bit more on the pressure advance or something like that, we might be able to get this thing going. So let's take another look at it. This is the other side of it. So again, you can see it smoothed it out. So we're definitely headed in the right direction. But what I think is important is consistency, and if this will work on another color. So it just so happens that I have another color of this eSun PLA Plus. So let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, so here's the yellow up to the control, and as you can see, wow, just really, really good. No artifacting. There's still some ridges there, but for the underside, that looks really, really good. So if we tune one of the filament, I was trying to get any angle, but the camera would not pick up anything, and it felt really, really smooth there, especially on this side. But as you can see, really, really smooth. So we did have a really good result from the tuning. So I hope this helps. And let me go back to Orca and I'll show you all of the settings for eSun PLA Plus. All right, so now I'm back in Orca and I'll show you all of my settings here again. So 0.9702, 0.022. I didn't change any of the temperatures or do any of that, and I changed the max volumetric speed to 15. that may or may not work for you, but that could be a really good starting place for you to get that done. So I hope everybody has great luck with doing this, and I hope you have a great week. See you guys next week.